we are the maker of our own path, and we're the doer. We have to do the work. No one else can do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to trust yourself enough. You have to have the confidence in yourself to go forward and move in this world in such a way that you're kind to yourself too. And only when you're kind to yourself and you trust yourself, you can be kind to other people. And then trust in the universe that whatever is coming your way is the universe working on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the guru lies.
Hello and welcome to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, the host of the podcast, a yoga and meditation teacher and philosophy lover. Each week you will hear eye-opening interviews with the different teachers of the Yandara Yoga Institute located in beautiful Baja, Mexico, along with other teachers that pass through here. This life-changing knowledge shared through authentic, heartfelt communication will help you live a happier, more fulfilled, and connected life. Let's dive in. I'm so excited to have Nina Rao as our guest today. Nina is a beautiful Kirtan musician. Her roots originate in South India, where she was first introduced to Kirtan by her chanter-musician grandfather at the age of 9 years old. Her early work life began in the banking industry in New York. Then she moved on to organizing and leading photographic wildlife safaris in Africa and in India. It was only when she met Krishna Das in New York that her path returned to chanting. She's been here in the last few days with the Bhakti Fest, joining Krishna Das and the team here performing every evening, every afternoon, and it's been a real pleasure and honor to be able to attend these events. So thank you for doing this, Nina. I would love to start with briefly explaining what is Kirtan and a little bit about your journey to becoming a Kirtan artist.
It's always interesting when people introduce me as a Kirtan artist. Kirtan very simply is the form of spiritual practice that we participate in India, where we're singing the names of the divine. And if anyone has been to India or not been to India, you know that the divine has numerous names, almost an infinite number of names. And what's good about that is that you can find what resonates for you. You hear a sound and then you want to keep repeating that sound. And so there's a path for everyone in this practice. Kirtan is specifically the singing, so it's set to melody and it can be very joyful. And it's also a group practice. It's normally something that you do together with others. And because of that, we help others to do their practice and then others help us do our practice.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, my first exposure to it was actually in my grandfather's home in South India. Actually with a roof that looks very much like this.
Wow.
There was a thatch roof with coconut leaves and we weren't right on the ocean. The house wasn't, but it was surrounded by orchards. And my grandfather was an engineer for the British government, but he was a natural singer and he loved South Indian, what they call bhajans. Bhajans are devotional prayers. And he would sing them. He could just figure out the melodies and sing them on his own. And he had a harmonium in his house, which is the first harmonium I ever saw. And my parents weren't so involved in the practice. But when we went there and I asked him, can you show me how you play the harmonium? Because I never took any music classes then, and I still haven't. And so he said, yes, I'll show you, but you have to sing with me. And I said, oh, what are we going to sing? And at that moment, he shared with us a simple chant to Ganesha. And he said, just follow me. I'll sing a line and then you repeat what I sing. So that was my first experience of call and response, like we've been doing all these days. And it was so communal, my grandmother came out of the kitchen, my mother arrived from somewhere, my aunts who knew the songs, my little sisters, my cousins, and we just sat around on the floor together, in the house.
That sounds beautiful.
And it was joyful and just simple also. There's a simplicity about it, I think, because you don't really have to know anything. And he really showed that to me by me never having done it before. And yet it was so easy to slip right into it. And then a few days later, they had satsang at their house, which is again something I had never experienced. Because we lived abroad. I forgot to mention, we weren't living in India at that time. So in the village, all the village people came over, and there was a big living room like this, kind of open air, and an altar was set up in the middle of the living room. And the women sat on one side, the men sit on one side, which is very traditional in India. And then not only did my grandfather lead the chanting, the young women, anybody who knew how to chant, they were leading the prayers. And I just remember being transported into a different space, which I felt and I kept with me, though I never talked about it with anyone for so many years. And then when I came to New York in the 1980s, I was completely involved in my corporate world of what I was doing back then, until I discovered yoga. And I went to my yoga teacher's retreat. And at the retreat, Krishna Das was singing. And this was in the early days when nobody really knew who he was. He had just put out his first album. This was like 1996 when I met him. And he sang in the satsang that night. I didn't know, and I thought, I wasn't sure it was going to be very good because I said, I don't know. First, I thought it was going to be a failed Indian musician, but it wasn't. And then I said, this is worse because not only is it not a failed Indian musician, it's a white guy. So I had my bias in my head also, Even though I was taking yoga from Westerners, because we never were exposed to yoga in India, so that was a new thing for me. Yeah. It's now taken on a new role, but usually it's only people who are renunciates or people very deep in a particular kind of spiritual practice that would do yoga. It was never mainstream for us, for sure. Now, when I go back to India, all my friends are doing yoga, but we weren't then. But when I heard Krishna Das sing the first Sri Ram, when I think back on it now, I recall that feeling that I had when I was a child, singing with my grandfather. And I was completely swept up by it. And we were in a retreat, and that was the first night, so we were there for a few days, and I had a chance to sing more with him. And then all I wanted to do was hear him. I was waiting for him to come in the evenings to come and sing. And at the end of the retreat, you have a sharing circle where you talk about what did you learn or whatever it was. And there were 50 people in the room in a circle, and I was, of course, the last person. So I waited for everyone to talk. And when my turn came, just at that moment, Krishna Das walked into the room. And I just started sobbing, and I couldn't stop. And there were no words. And it was then that I understood that I didn't understand what was happening here. And I wanted to find out. So we became very good friends at that retreat. And, he had been to India, so he was very familiar with being, I'm as I am now, I'm one of the very few Indians that are ever at these things. It's still the case. And that's okay. But for me, my whole development on this path, not just as what you would call as a Kirtan artist, but as a seeker, really, has been learning from the Westerners. Because the way in which they approach the practice was to understand how to integrate it into your life.
Mhm.
That is the case in India too, but we don't discuss it. And I really felt like it needed to be discussed.
Mhm.
And that it was okay to talk about emotional things, hi birds,
Yeah,
and
we have
psychological
two.
things. And, all that was very important to bring into the practice.
Mhm.
So, as a kirtan artist, I don't even know what to tell you, honestly.
Mhm.
When I started singing with Krishna Das, he wasn't traveling or anything at that time. And then slowly he got invited to California and he was away a little bit because he used to sing every week at a yoga studio in New York City. And some friends and I decided that we should just sing at home. Like if he wasn't going to be around, we would still carry on the Monday night kirtan tradition. So I mentioned that to Krishnas and I said, I think I need to get a harmonium, though I don't know how to play one.
Mhm.
And he literally drove by the next day and dropped a harmonium, one of his old ones, in my house.
Wow.
And I just sort of figured out melodies. I remembered some of the ones that my grandfather had shown us of so many years ago. And I was in my early 30s at that point.
Wow.
But they came back to me.
Mhm.
And so what I sing now is really a manifestation of just something that's been given to me that I don't really understand. I don't have any background in music other than like to listen to Indian classical music, but I understood that the chanting is really the root practice for me.
Mhm.
And I went to India subsequently and I was with Siddhima and she gave me that seva. She said, just chant. That's your service, is to sing. Not necessarily, she didn't necessarily mean to sing at retreats or anything, but she said, this is your practice. Sing to Maharaji.
There are so many beautiful things about what you just said that I would love to kind of tackle or unpack. I mean, first, the fact that you were sitting as a family and just singing together. And I think that's so special that you had that chance and opportunity to spend this time with your family, because we forget that the relationships that we have is really about the time that we spend together. And a lot of us are spending time together, but we're on our phone and not even paying attention to each other, not talking or thinking about, things that aren't actually happening in that moment. And sitting together and singing, I can't imagine how that must have been.
The thing was, it was such a part of life that we didn't even really think about it very much. You do it, and then you get up, and then everybody went back to the kitchen and cooking, and my grandfather went to fix the well, and whatever else was going on.
Yeah.
But that we can take that time out to do something together. And that was actually very much part of what was going on in my grandfather's house. He would have puja every day in his house. So he would have an altar room. So puja is the act of worship. And it's usually something that you do on a regular basis. So like many Indian households, there's a little altar room. And the deity that your family lineage belongs to is usually the presiding deity on the altar. And, every morning and every night we would go around the house, light the ghee lamps, do some aarti, waving of the lights and singing prayers to the deity. And we loved it. We loved it so much, going around with my aunt and doing that, So just the way in which practice is part of Indian life, it's so natural. And so when we as Westerners, I count myself as that nowadays, we go back and you see a different way of living, God is living in your home in a very different way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, Bhakti is, Kirtan is part of Bhakti Yoga, and Bhakti is the yoga of devotion. How do you relate to that?
When we asked our question about the yoga of devotion, you have to ask, what are we devoted to?
Yes.
So for example, in the retreat that we've been in, somebody asked me, so who is Hanuman real? So Hanuman is one of these beings, right, that are considered deity in India, remover of obstacles like Ganesha or Krishna or Ram. These are names we've probably heard. And in India, it's very much part of life again, so growing up, we had books that told us these stories, and it was your parents would tell you these kind of stories as well. But when you're coming in from the outside, it's hard to understand what are you doing exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So usually how I like to think about it is the feeling that I had when I heard my grandfather sing, the feeling that I had when I heard Krishnadas sing was a pull towards something.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what it was, but it was a pull towards something. And everything on my path ever since has been to trust that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Because your heart knows what it wants. It wants connection.
Yes.
And we seek connection on the outside, with other people. Like you and I are talking with each other and we're making a connection. We sit and listen to the waves and we're trying to make a connection to nature. But what are we really looking for? We're looking for a place where everything feels okay and we feel held. So on that level, we're all Bhakti Yogis, right?
Yeah.
And I think the difference is that when you find a practice, let's say it's chanting, or other parts of Bhakti Yoga are the telling of sacred stories, acting out the leelas. There are many different forms of practice of Bhakti Yoga. And I think that those of us who are drawn to these practices recognize that there's a path to walk. And the path is doing some kind of sadhana, some kind of practice. Because if we don't have a way to ground ourselves, to find a place of refuge, and also to find a tool. We need something, because you can't find a way to think yourself out of a way of thinking of something, and we can spin around in our thoughts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of the practices, and that's been established over the years, many, many hundreds, thousands of years, is that the practices work to quiet the mind and to open the heart. Whatever the practice might be, it could be jnana yoga, it could be breath practice, it could be, all of them or all of them together.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly mantra repetition is one of the most ancient practices in India.
Mm-hmm.
And mantra, man means the heart mind, the place where our cognitive mind, as well as the places where we feel, how we feel, our sense of well-being. And tra is the root for instrument. So mantra is instrument of the mind, for the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty is you don't have to know how it works. It's kind of like, you go to a chemist to fill your prescription. You don't know how the medicine works in your body, but you'll take it because you know that it's going to help you feel better.
Yeah.
But you have to take it.
Hey, I'm quickly interrupting the episode to extend an invitation. If you are interested in deepening into any of the subjects we talk about on the podcast, we offer many different experiences on our beautiful grounds here in Baja, Mexico. From 9-day modules such as sound healing and yoga nidra to breath and meditation, as well as 200 or 300-hour yoga teacher trainings and many different shorter retreats. Check out our website, Yandara.com, to see all the information about the different experiences. Let's get back to the episode. How does your personal practice look like?
I wish I did more of my own.
All of us.
We all wish we did more. I like to do some amount of breath practice. I like to do something physical for my body just to move it as I'm getting older. It's getting harder and harder. And what happens is that there's just not enough time in the day, I feel, for everything that I need to get done. But mostly it's a little bit of breath practice, and the Hanuman Chalisa is a core part of my practice.
Mm-hmm.
But I also do japa, mantra practice, which is repetition of the mantra without music. And then I read. I love to read sacred texts.
Oh, wow. What is one book that really changed your perspective?
the Ramayana or the Ramcharitmanas.
Mm-hmm.
But I love them all. I love the Mahabharata. I love the story of the Devi Mahatmyam. And I kind of read them cyclically, like throughout the year. I go back and read them over because you learn something new each time you read it.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of Bhakti Yoga practice, which is reading of sacred texts. So.
Yeah, the self-study.
Yeah. Self-study, you can do it with a friend. Like during COVID, I had a friend who went on Instagram and read the whole Ramcharitmanas. She would read like 15 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
So we would just read 3-4 verses. Okay, and then go off and do your day.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got through the whole year. We read the whole book.
Wow. Together.
Whoever wanted to log in at that moment, they heard a little bit.
Beautiful.
But she got to read the whole thing. So
beautiful.
There's so many ways to do practice like that, and when my child was really young at night, what I would do is we would open the Ramcharitmanas and I would read a couple of verses to her and then she would fall asleep. But what happens is I was reading it. It was good for me as well. And so I think the key to any kind of practice is the repetitiveness of it.
Yeah.
And coming back to it each day, even if it's 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my guru, Siddhima, I said, Ma, I used to translate for her when I went to India for all the Westerners who went. And so people would say, Ma, what practice should I do? And she would say, do this and do that. And so one day I asked her, I said, Ma, you've never told me what to do. She said, oh, you're so busy. Just do what you can. Mm. So I felt like I got a gift there. But at the same time, I have to self-motivate. And what's happening is that the more practice I do, the more I want to do because you can feel the benefit of it. It's not even like an evaluation of, oh, so I did this and I'm much better at this and I'm so much calmer. It's not like that. You just know that you're going to feel better. It's like when you get into the swing of doing exercise and you realize, oh yeah, if I just took this walk every day, I would feel good.
Yeah.
And this has even a stronger pull than that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about Kirtan and mantra, it was about clearing the mind and finding this presence and this calm within. And I feel that it's a lot about being able to be in a state of reflection and noticing what is happening inside. How does this mantra help you to reach more clarity and truth in your reflection?
I mean, I don't know how it works, but it works. Something about mantra repetition creates that space for one to be a witness of our own minds to even a tiny, tiny degree for like a second a day. And the more that we do that, the more that space widens. And then you're not so associated with your emotional thoughts and reactive behaviors. You can see it. And suddenly everything is not all about me at all times.
Yeah.
It's just what's going on. And you can witness and accept and let it move through you. Let life move through you in a better way. But, there are specific mantras in the Veda tradition, Veda chanting tradition, like the Gayatri mantra, for example, which we did this week, which is specifically to the inner sun, Savitur, for illuminating our own minds, so that we can understand better and creating clarity for us. So there are specific things like that, but even if you don't, even if you just stay with the simple practice of the repetition of Ram, do it every day. And then, Krishna Das says this all the time. The practice is simple. It's not easy.
Yeah.
But you say the mantra, keep repeating it, and you'll realize that you've thought about at least three other things in the one Ram.
Yeah.
And you come back and you remind yourself, okay, back to Ram. Keep coming back. And that exercises the muscle that's needed to let go
Mhm.
of what our thoughts might be that are holding us all the time or pulling us away.
Mhm.
And that happens very naturally.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
There's a line from your website that I would like to read to you, and then I have a question about it. Life is a complex, exploratory process of daily routines, practices, and analysis, all to cultivate the ability to really trust myself. So I was wondering, what does it mean for you to trust yourself?
Yeah. I'm still trying to understand that every day. You know, I think of all the teachings I've ever heard, the one that stayed with me from the very beginning was actually something that Krishna said. And he said, if you don't trust your heart, you don't trust yourself, who are you going to trust?
Mhm.
And if you just think about that for a second, there's no other way, right? And of course, we have to take guidance. I mean, it's not that, you don't need any guidance. We need guidance. But to trust your heart enough to know that your motivations and your intentions are going to be beneficial for you and for all beings is where I would like my trust to lie. And if I have something that I want, it's okay for me to want it.
Mhm.
And you don't need to be given permission for that. We are the maker of our own path, and we're the doer. We have to do the work. No one else can do it for us.
Mhm.
So you have to trust yourself enough. You have to have the confidence in yourself to go forward and move in this world in such a way that you're kind to yourself too. And only when you're kind to yourself and you trust yourself, you can be kind to other people. And then trust in the universe that whatever is coming your way is the universe working on your behalf.
Mhm.
That's where the guru lies.
Yeah. For me, the process of trust is also giving it over to something that's bigger than me, because in the past, when I was feeling that all the pressure to create and manifest all the things that I want to do is just on me, it was so scary that it kind of shut me down. Like I couldn't do anything.
You froze.
Yeah, I froze, exactly. And also, a lot of times in these mantras, it's about giving over the power to something bigger. If I'm not wrong, the Hanuman Chalisa is about that.
Well, we're asking him for his help.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting thing, because the way giving yourself over can already create fear. And like, if you think about that, because we're so much wanting to control ourselves, like the word surrender is a very difficult word for many of us. And it's hard to imagine that you can let go into something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And to some being or what are we surrendering to?
Yeah.
And it's very simple. We're just surrendering to what is. And what is includes what we want.
Yeah.
And it's okay to want them. And we do our best to achieve. We ask for help, like we ask for the goddess, we ask Hanuman, we ask whoever we're talking to.
Yeah.
And then whatever we receive will be the gift, whatever that is. It may not be exactly what we want, but if we can do our best to find what we're looking for, ask for help, and then wait. So it takes some patience as well. That's part of trust, is the patience.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So being conscious of your time, I would love to move on to the closing curiosity questions.
Yeah.
So we can just do it quickly. Okay. But actually it's pretty deep questions.
Okay, we'll do the fast round of it. Yeah.
What is something that you changed your mind about?
Being skinny.
I love that.
That was definitely, I don't know, that's just what came to my mind, holding on to this whole body consciousness thing, which is so embedded in and then after you reach a certain age, your body does what it does.
Yeah. And honestly, who said that we have to look a certain way?
Nobody.
We did. Exactly.
So that's something I changed my mind about for sure. Yeah. For myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is something you didn't think you could do and you did?
A handstand.
Ooh.
Many years ago. Not lately. That's a really, actually, such an interesting question. That is one, handstand. But I'm trying to think of, there are so many, and when I think about it now, I don't think there's anything. Maybe I haven't wanted to do much.
Maybe you just believed in yourself that you can do anything you want.
I am pretty willful in terms of if I find something, I'm not particularly ambitious in terms of needing to accomplish 1,000 different things or competitive or that I need to be the best at something. But if I do decide to try something, I'll go for it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What gives you hope?
Children.
What is your definition of happiness?
Being okay with everything that's going on, no matter how difficult it is.
And what is something that you're curious about right now?
What my daughter's going to be when she grows up.
Or the many things that she'll be.
Yes, we have no idea.
Yeah, beautiful. Is there anything else that's important for you to share?
The only thing I think that's important to share is if you are even slightly attracted to taking a retreat or doing a workshop or doing a class, and you're not sure why, it doesn't matter. Just do it. Just do it and know that the practice is a refuge and it's all that we have to hold on to. Because everything else changes, but the practice doesn't.
Beautiful. How can people stay connected with you?
Oh, you can... they can find me on my website, which is ninaraochant.com.
Great. Thank you, Nina, so much for doing this. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Now, after this time to nurture your mind and your spirit, we invite you to take a moment to consider others. A kind wish might come to mind. Know that what we learn becomes more valuable when we apply it and share it with others. So share this episode on Instagram stories, tag Yandara and I, or share with a loved one so that more people can benefit from it. Our hope is that the search will lead you home to who you already are, to what was always there. We'll be back next week with more inspiration, honest conversation, and insight into the energetic world around us. Thank you for listening and watching.